Christmas morning, 1872, in a quiet lodging house on a gaslit London street, a young woman named Harriet Buswell was found dead in her room. Her throat cut, her door still locked from the inside. The night before, on Christmas Eve, she had been seen walking home through the winter fog with a stranger, a quietly spoken man of foreign appearance. And then he was gone. Left behind in that room were only the cold silence, a half-eaten apple bearing the unmistakable impression of human teeth, and a city that would not feel safe again for a very long time. One man was arrested, his teeth measured against that bite, and then released, his innocence established, the real killer still somewhere out in the dark. The Great Coram Street Murder was never solved. A ghost in the record books of Victorian London, a stranger no one could name, a question that has waited over 150 years for an answer. Welcome, and thank you for being here, because this case needs you. Over the course of this investigation, every clue will be placed on the board in front of you, the witnesses, the evidence, the silences, and by the end, the verdict is yours to make. Chapter 1, Christmas Morning, Room 4. Christmas morning, 1872, and the lodging house on Great Coram Street had not yet stirred. The landlady, Mrs. Hacker, had a house to manage and a routine that did not wait for holidays. She noticed, first, the silence, the particular silence of a room that should not have been so quiet. Room 4 was let to a young woman who had arrived the previous evening. The lodger had given a name, paid a shilling, and asked for no supper. Mrs. Hacker knocked once, then again, and the door gave back nothing. The door was not locked. It simply resisted, as though something pressed against it from within. What she found inside stopped her at the threshold. The young woman lay on the bed, and she would not be woken. The police were summoned, and by mid-morning, Scotland Yard stood in that small room. Consider what the investigators were already weighing. She had arrived alone at night on Christmas Eve and told no one where she had come from. Who was the woman in room 4? And how, on the longest night of the year, had she come to be there alone? Let's open the board. The location, Great Coram Street, Bloomsbury, London, England, and Harriet Buswell, the victim. Chapter 2. The woman called Harriet. Her name was Harriet Buswell. She was 25 years old in the winter of 1872. She had come to London from the countryside, like so many others before her. She went by the name Clara Burton in some circles, an alias common to women of her profession. She lived in a rented room at number 12 Great Coram Street, Bloomsbury. Her landlady, Mrs. Hicks, described her as quiet and generally well-behaved. The lodging house was full of women living the same uncertain life, existing in the margins Victorian London preferred not to see. Harriet's evenings took her to the theatres and supper rooms of the West End. She was known to return late, sometimes with company, sometimes alone. On Christmas Eve, 1872, she was seen leaving the Alhambra Theatre on Leicester Square. She was not alone. A quiet, well-dressed stranger walked beside her. Think carefully about what we know. A young woman, a stranger, and a direction of travel into the dark. What do you make of those last few hours? She was never seen alive again. On the board so far, Harriet Buswell, the victim. Now we pin up unknown, the suspected killer. Chapter 3. The Man with the Foreign Accent. 3 witnesses, 3 fragments. One man none of them could quite place. The doorman at the nearby theater remembered a figure loitering on Great Coram Street on the night of Christmas Eve, 1872. He said the man had a foreign accent, precise, deliberate, each word chosen carefully. A cab driver came forward next, placing the same stranger near the lodging house late that evening. The driver noted the man's stillness. He did not fidget, did not look around, did not hurry. Then there was the landlady, Mrs. Hacker, who had spoken to the man herself. She described his speech as measured, almost, she said, as though he were reading from something prepared. She remembered his eyes, not because they were striking, but because they gave nothing away. Consider what these 3 accounts share. A foreigner, composed, unhurried, seemingly without nerves. Think about that for a moment. What does it mean to you that every witness agreed on his calm? Calm can be innocence, but calm in the hours before a murder can also be something rehearsed. Who plans to seem that calm? And what else, we must ask, did they plan? On the board so far, unknown, the suspected killer. Now we pin up Dr. Gottfried Hessel, the wrongly arrested cleared. Chapter 4. What the Room Kept Secret. December the 26th, 1872. Investigators entered room 4 of a Coram Street lodging house and stood very still. The room was quiet in a way that felt deliberate. Harriet's belongings were undisturbed. Her hat, her gloves, her small traveling bag, all exactly placed. There was no broken lock, no shattered glass, no mark of a door forced from outside. Whatever happened in this room, the room had let it happen. No chair was overturned, no pitcher smashed, no sign that Harriet had fought her way toward the door. The investigators recorded one intimate detail. 2 cups had been set out on the small table. Harriet had received a guest, and by every indication she had welcomed them. Consider what that tells us about the timeline. She felt safe, at least at first. What does that tell us about whoever she let through the door? Then, near the foot of the bed, a detective crouched and went quiet. On the floor lay a half-eaten apple, abandoned mid-bite, as though time itself had simply stopped. On the board so far, Dr. Gottfried Hessel, the wrongly arrested, cleared. Now we pin up 24 Deck 1872. Harriet seen returning with foreign stranger. Chapter 5. The Apple and the Bite Mark. Among the objects recovered from room 4, one stood apart from all the others. A half-eaten apple, left behind as though in haste. In December 1872, Metropolitan Police investigators understood immediately what it might mean. The bite preserved the exact spacing and shape of the killer's front teeth. Forensic dentistry as a formal discipline did not yet exist, but the logic was already alive in London's medical circles. Investigators consulted a dental surgeon, asking him to read the impression the way a tracker reads mud. The surgeon's conclusion was precise. The bite belonged to someone with a notable irregularity in the upper jaw. When a suspect was arrested, investigators did something almost unheard of for the era. They formally compared his teeth to the apple. The comparison, by all recorded accounts, was described as consistent. Consider what you know so far. A unique dental mark, a suspect in custody, a surgeon willing to testify. And ask yourself why that was not enough. In 1872, dental evidence carried no legal framework, no precedent, and no weight a barrister could not dismantle in minutes. The apple decayed, the case stalled, and someone in that city, someone whose teeth we could still describe, went entirely free. On the board so far, 24 Dec, 1872. Harriet seen returning with foreign stranger. Now we pin up 25 Dec, 1872. Harriet found dead, throat cut. Chapter 6. A City Gripped by Dread. Christmas morning, 1872, and London woke to something it could not explain. A young woman had been found murdered in her lodgings on Coram Street, Bloomsbury. By nightfall, the story had spread across every edition in the city. Bloomsbury, a respectable district of lodging houses and quiet squares, felt the ground shift beneath it. The killer had entered the house on Christmas Eve and left no reliable witness. He had come from somewhere and vanished back into a city of 3 million souls. That disappearance, clean, complete, on a night of carolers and candlelight, was what truly frightened people. The police had little to work with: a description, a foreign accent, and a handful of objects left in the room. Consider what that means. A killer precise enough to leave almost nothing on the busiest night of the year. What does that precision tell you about this person, about their nerve, their knowledge of that house? Within days, detectives had settled their attention on a single suspect. He was not a vagrant, not a criminal. He was a man of the cloth, and his arrest was about to send the case somewhere no one had anticipated. On the board so far, 25 Dec, 1872. Harriet found dead, throat cut. Now we pin up early 1873. Dr. Hessel arrested on suspicion. Chapter 7. The Arrested Clergyman. By January 1873, police had a name. Dr. Gottfried Hessel, a German clergyman living in London, had been placed near Coram Street on the night of the murder. 2 witnesses came forward and identified him. Their descriptions matched. A foreign-accented man, dark coat, restless manner. Then came the detail that electrified investigators: the bite mark. A forensic examiner compared the impression left in that apple to Dr. Hessel's teeth. The examiner concluded the marks were consistent. Consider what the police believed they had: a named suspect, 2 eyewitnesses, physical evidence, all pointing the same way. What do you make of that alignment? 3 independent strands converging on one man. Dr. Hessel was arrested and held. Then, under cross-examination, the witnesses faltered, contradicting each other on the hour, the light, the distance. An alibi emerged, verified, unshakable, and Hessel was released. The board was clear again. And somewhere in London, the real killer was still free. On the board so far, early 1873, Dr. Hessel arrested on suspicion. Now we pin up 1873, Hessel cleared. Case goes cold. Chapter 8. The alibi that broke the case. By January 1873, a man named Karl Hessel sat in custody, the prime suspect in the Coram Street killing. Detectives were certain the witness sightings placed him at the scene, but Hessel's alibi was specific. He had been elsewhere that Christmas Eve, and he could prove it. 2 separate witnesses confirmed his whereabouts for the critical hours of that night. The identification evidence, when examined closely, began to fracture. Witnesses had glimpsed the suspected man briefly, by gaslight, in a city of thousands. Consider what you know of this moment. 3 strangers, 3 separate sightings, all slightly different in detail. Victorian courts placed enormous weight on eyewitness testimony and enormous pressure on those who gave it. When the alibi held under scrutiny, the magistrate had no lawful choice but to release Hessel. The investigation, already weeks old, had spent its momentum on the wrong man, and here is the wound that never closed. The real killer had been free the entire time. If the arrest had drawn every eye in London, someone may have used that confusion to disappear, and the detectives were left holding nothing. On the board so far, 1873. Hessel cleared. Case goes cold. Now we pin up a key clue. Bitten apple. Teeth marks. Chapter 9. 3 theories, no answer. By January 1873, investigators had 3 distinct theories, and not one of them was clean. The first theory, a stranger, premeditated, had chosen Harriet Burton deliberately. The calm state of the room argued for someone who had planned, not panicked. The second theory, a crime of opportunity, a stranger who had simply followed her in from the street. This theory rested on the witness accounts of a man with a foreign accent seen near Coram Street that night. But the building's geography made undetected entry almost impossibly difficult for a true stranger, which brings us to the third theory. Someone already known, at least in passing, within Harriet's world. Consider the apple. Someone bit into it, set it down, and left. And we still do not know when or why. Ask yourself, does a panicked stranger pause to eat before leaving a crime scene? Each theory accounts for some of the evidence, and each one stumbles on what it cannot explain. One detail, above all, refuses to fit any theory. Why was the door to room 4 left unlocked from the inside? On the board so far, a key clue, bitten apple, teeth marks. Now we pin up a key clue, witness accounts, foreign accent. Chapter 10. The board is yours now. Everything we know about the night of December 24th, 1872, is now before you. A young woman named Harriet Buswell was found dead in her room at 12 Great Coram Street. Witnesses placed a foreign-accented man leaving the building in the early hours. That accent, described variously as German, Dutch, or Scandinavian, was the single sharpest detail any witness offered. Then there was the apple, half-eaten, left on the nightstand beside Harriet's bed. The bite mark was distinctive, and in 1872, bite mark evidence was something investigators did not yet fully understand how to use. A clergyman was arrested and then released his alibi holding, the case collapsing around the police like wet paper. Here is where I want you to pause with me. Look at what remains. A foreign accent, a half-eaten apple, a failed arrest, 3 competing theories. What does your instinct tell you about the shape of this crime? Was this a stranger passing through London? Someone who knew the neighborhood? Or someone Harriet herself had reason to trust? We want to know what theory you're carrying after all of this. Leave it in the comments, and let us weigh the possibilities together, because the man who walked out of 12 Great Coram Street that Christmas morning was never found, and by every measure we have, he simply walked on the board so far. A key clue, witness accounts, foreign accent. Now we pin up a key clue, lodging house crime scene.